It was the most beautiful home on the block, and it was like you're entering into a wealthy home in China.
Nona Mock Wyman came to the Ming Quong Home for Girls in 1946. She was 12 years old and had already been living in orphanages for most of her life. She remembers entering her new home.
When you go up the front steps, there's the two lions to guard you, and it's a very impressive house.
It was a big blue Victorian building with a well-kept garden on the edge of Oakland's Chinatown. Wyman says it stood out from the run-down houses nearby. The home was called Ming Quong, Chinese for radiant light, and it was run by the Presbyterian Church. It housed girls whose parents had died or couldn't take care of them. Nona Mock Wyman says coming to the home was like walking into a mansion.
And the living room is very big, and it has nice antique Chinese furniture that was probably donated to the home. And Chinese rugs.
On one side, an elegant staircase with a gleaming wooden handrail led to the second floor where the girls slept. It was often referred to as an orphanage, but not all the girls were orphans. Wyman says no one explained to her why she was given up as a small child, but she believes it was because her mother was sick with tuberculosis.
I came to the home when I was 2.5 years old, crying and screaming my little head off.
Wyman's friend, Bernice Lee Gu, knows exactly why she ended up at the home for girls. Her mother had already passed away.
In my case, my father worked at night, and so as a result, my brother and I ran wild doing all kinds of things until juvenile hall came in, and then they contacted the Presbyterian Board of National Missions.
In some cases, a culture clash was at play. Some Protestant reformers believed working-class parents, especially single parents, couldn't raise their children properly. In any case, for Nona Mock Wyman and Bernice Lee Gu, Ming Quong was home. Most of their childhood was spent in the beautiful Victorian with about 25 other girls, some of whom came to be like sisters.
We couldn't wait for a new girl to come because we could, what's your name, da-da-da, and everything, where are you from?
Oh, what do you have? Let's look at your clothes.
But mostly, Lee Gu says the girls lived a life of routine and discipline.
When we got up, we did our whatever chores we were assigned. Then we had breakfast. Then we had to go upstairs, make our beds, and clean our rooms. And there was a sheet on the door when the staff member came in and inspected your room. If something wasn't right, she would write it on the door.
Still, there was time for play. Any house full of teenaged girls is bound to have its share of inside jokes and pranks.
We used to have this really funny joke we used to do. You probably don't know the song. It goes, you sigh, the song begins, and I hear music, and it's magic, and then we take the back of someone's bra and snap it, and everybody would laugh.
It was at Ming Quong that the girls grew into women. Mock Wyman admits that her nickname was Greenhorn because she didn't know anything about the opposite sex. Both women remember the boy they had a crush on. Mock Wyman, now 76, holds up a drawing of a boy with high cheekbones, his hair slicked back like a character from Grease.
Bernice, who is this person?
That is Bobby Joe.
And who is Bobby Joe?
Well, he was first Leela Young's boyfriend. And then after she left, was yours?
No, no.
I was last.
Just once. You were actually his girlfriend? Mm-hmm. See, I didn't even know that.
Even 60 years later, the two women are giggling like schoolgirls as they look at the picture.
I just know that you were infatuated with him, so I just brought this here today just so you
to perk me up. Doesn't he look like a movie star?
Although the girls' lives were a lot like those of other young women, sometimes it was clear they were different.
At the home, if your mother was alive, you wore a red rose.
Was it on Mother's Day?
Mother's Day.
Right.
And if your mother was deceased, you wore a pink rose. So because my mother never came to visit me, after all these years, I would say, is my mother still alive? I'd tell the teacher, ask the teacher that.
One year, the teachers gave Nona Mock Wyman a pink rose because they decided that her mother had probably died from tuberculosis.
And so how about you, Bernice?
No, I always had the pink rose because they knew my mother was gone.
We were just all happy everybody had a rose.
Yeah.
The girls didn't know any other way of life. And Mak Wyman remembers how difficult it was to leave her Ming Quong family after she graduated from high school.
It was like the worst part of my life.
Girls weren't allowed to stay once they became adults.
Leaving the home that you grew up in, leaving all the girls. I cried all the way from Oakland to Palo Alto.
Today, Mak Wyman owns a boutique in Walnut Creek named after the home she grew up in, and Lee Gu is retired. Every few years, a group of Ming Quong girls meets to talk about their time together. But while they've stayed in contact, their former home was eventually torn down to make way for the Lake Merritt BART station. The women visited the site on one of their reunions.
When we walked around and I said, well, this is where I lived, and here it was a BART station.
It was so beautiful too.
I know.
The casual passerby would have no way of knowing what used to be where the station is now. The history of the Ming Quong home is kept alive only through the memories of the women who grew up there. To help preserve those stories, Nona Mak Wyman wrote a memoir about her time in the orphanage called Chopstick Childhood. The 3-block area that included Ming Quong Home for Girls is now up for redevelopment again. The BART Plaza that replaced the home may itself be transformed with new buildings and public spaces, continuing a cycle of change that sometimes leaves the past behind in the quest for a better future. In Oakland, I'm Annabelle Peterson for Cross Currents.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Ming Quong Chinese Girls Home webinar. Today, we have Ming Quong's alumni that will share their life stories, living there and life after Ming Quong. But before I introduce our narrators and the panelists, I'd like to give you a brief introduction to our organization. The Chinese Historical and Cultural Project, a nonprofit organization that was founded in 1987 by Jerry Wong and Lilian Gong. This new nonprofit was created to educate, to preserve, and promote Chinese history and culture in Santa Clara County Valley. CHCP was initially formed to reconstruct the 1888 Incheon Museum in around 1987, a building that is the last historical building in San Jose, California, Chinatown. Before that building was torn down back in the early 1900s and was later donated in 1991 to the San Jose History Park, where you can visit or even log on to chcp.org and please check out our virtual tour of the museum. Many of the artifacts were saved and currently on display in the museum for your viewing. As a note, during this webinar, if you have any questions anytime during this webinar, please enter them in the icon, Q&A icon on top, or the Q&A icon on the bottom. And we will do our very best, because of time constraint, we will do our very, very best to answer all those questions. If we have a lot of questions, we will have a Ming Quong part 2. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our very first speaker, Nona Mak Wyman. Nona?
Hi, I'm Nona. Welcome to the Ming Quong webinar. I am lucky to be here today because I was 2.5 days in the not the Los Gatos, at the Kaiser Hospital. And due to my doctor's orders, I'm in a cubbyhole at the store with my feet lifted up. I'm grateful to be here. But now back to the Ming Quong, when I was left there, I was 2 years old when my mother left me forever at the Los Gatos Ming Quong home. I was the youngest back then, and now today, I am the oldest. More wisdom? Ha 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 ha. Hope you're all laughing, but definitely I feel like I'm going on 98. Back then, when the strangers were looking at me in this great big giant room, I cried and was screaming my head off. And that unforgettable day, one of my Ming Quong sisters, with tears in her eyes, placed her hand on mine, and I was comforted. My sobbing subsided. Thus, my new life emerged. While the criteria for acceptance age in the Los Gatos Ming Quong home was 5, I entered at 2 and was well behaved due to my mother's training. I left Ming Quong for Oakland as a teenager. So what did I learn in this life? Many experiences with customers sharing their stories at the store, reading positive books, and especially my life at the Ming Quong home. That was my education. Plus, every day I am always learning more and more each day. Ming Quong means radiant light spiritually, and literally translated means smart, brilliant, bright, and shiny. When I tell my customers that, they go out happy and content. We are grateful to missionary Donna Cameron for adding the word home to Ming Quong. So it was Ming Quong home. We never, ever wanted to be adopted. The word orphanage was coined in the news coverage of my first write-up, Chopstick Childhood. And now to Elena.
Thank you, Nona. Before I share my story with you, I'd like to give you a little brief history so we put everything in context. So here we go. In 1925 to the late 1950s, the Ming Quong homes welcomed more than 400 girls needing a safe and positive home environment. Until the 1950s, Ming Quong was the only institution in the entirety of North America that would accept Chinese, Chinese American, and Chinese biracial girls who needed help. David, can we have that first slide? This flow chart shows you the work of the Presbyterian missionaries, especially Donna Cameron, with specific dates of origin and functions of the facility. When you look over here on the left, this is all in San Francisco, began in 1874, and especially at 920 Sacramento Street, because it functioned to house Chinese girls and women rescued victims of human trafficking, and later housed women from Japan and Europe. Much later, this 920 became what we know as Cameron House today. The centerpiece here is 1915, took a memorial home functioning to house innocent Chinese toddlers and children needing a safe home environment. Ms. Cameron felt it was very important to separate the innocent children from the victims of human trafficking. Over here on the right is the story of the Ming Quong homes that started on the Mills estate, functioning for housing of girls needing help due to death of a parents, non-acceptance of a step-parent, parental divorce, unfit parents or guardians with mental illness, battery of the mother, criminal behavior, psychological, emotional, physical, and mental abuse, and emergency refugee status, not a place for the rescued victims of human trafficking. In 1934, Ms. Cameron made 2 different places for us. One, the Los Gatos Ming Quong home on Loma de Alta Avenue for children that first had respiratory problems such as tuberculosis, asthma, pneumonia, and then it became a facility that housed the younger girls from preschool to 6th grade based on the same reasons of 1925. The Ming Quong home here on Mills campus was then closed, and we moved to the Ming Quong home in Oakland near Chinatown. And this was a home for the girls 7th to 12th grade, needing the same help and home environment. Now, here are some locations you might recognize. This here is Cameron House today, but was called the Occidental Presbyterian Mission Home. Next, Tooker Memorial Home for the Infants and Toddlers, 1915. Next, the first Ming Quong home on the Mills Estate campus in the Oakland Hills. Next, the Los Gatos Ming Quong on Loma Alta Avenue, beginning in 1934. Next, the Ming Quong home near Oakland Chinatown, beginning in 1935. Now, here are some slides that will kind of capture the life of the girls at Ming Quong in Oakland and in Los Gatos. Here we are having prayers and fellowship after dinner. Next, learning Chinese from Mrs. Lee. Next, preparing a Chinese meal with Mrs. Lee. And next, this is our Ming Quong home daughter coming home for her wedding in the Oakland Ming Quong home. The Los Gatos pictures. Next. These are the girls dressed in their Sunday best at the Ming Quong Archway. Next. Bedtime stories with our house mother. Next. On schedule, it's time for you to brush your teeth. Next. Free time to play. Erwin, now could you introduce the rest of our panelists? And oh, I know what. Why don't I go on and tell you my story?
Great. Thank you.
Okay. My name is Elena Wong Viscovich, and I entered Los Gatos Ming Quong in 1953. I was 11, and later I moved to the Oakland Ming Quong home and stayed there until it closed in 1958. I was 16 and just finished the 11th grade. Before Ming Quong, I was passed from family to family in San Francisco, Chinatown. I knew my mother died, but why, where, and the reasons were all different stories. I went to school only when I wanted to, and more often than not, you would see me at the museum, a movie, or watching a tennis match in North Beach. The cable car drivers were my guardian angels on the street. I was dropped off in Los Gatos by my so-called father, a person I infrequently saw or knew. I weighed less than 50 pounds and had a double row of teeth. My permanent teeth came in over my baby teeth. I truly felt like an ugly duckling. And until Ming Quong, I was an outsider. I didn't fit well in school and had no parents to call my own. My fondest memories was arriving at Ming Quong, Los Gatos at lunchtime, sitting with Miss Hayes and 6 little girls, where I ate 3 grilled cheese sandwiches, salad, and 5 double scoops of ice cream, and then drank 2 8-ounce glasses of milk. The home provided regular meals, my own room with a clean bed, sheets and warm blankets, and most of all the books that I would ever want to read. I no longer feared from being hit, attacked, or chased. Finally, there was some order in my life. We prepared and completed, we prayed, first of all, and then we completed our chores, and we had free time to play, and I was encouraged to do well in school. While I was precocious, my Ming Quong sisters were respectful, gentle, and always obeyed the rules. We were taught to be kind and helpful to one another, and I often led them astray with my creative ideas. Elementary school was exciting. To my surprise, I was put in the 6th grade instead of the 5th, where I was challenged by the high standards in Los Gatos, and I excelled academically. The greatest challenge was how to finish high school when the Ming Quong home closed in 1958. 2 choices were given to me: either go back to my relatives in San Francisco or be placed as a nanny or housekeeper in a private Oakland home. Well, instead, I moved into an apartment with a Ming Quong graduate that had a full-time job. And because I wanted to stay in Oakland to finish high school, I wanted to attend the University of California, and I wanted to become a medical doctor. I stopped all my extracurricular activities and only played on the tennis team. I found part-time work at the dietitian's office at Peralta Hospital. I smiled a lot, and I worked over and above what was asked of me. That endeared me to the doctors, the patients, the chef, and my peers, which resulted in overtime and gifts that were monetary for Christmas and for my graduation. Moreover, it meant a free meal for every shift I'd work. My tennis coach and my teammates kept my secret of having no adult supervision from the school authorities, and I survived. I graduated from high school with honors and attended the University of California and San Francisco State, where I played on their tennis teams. Unlike my Ming Quong sisters, who did not want to be adopted or could not be adopted, I was adopted after high school and learned what a lovely family was. Now, Dale, why don't you share your experience?
Dale, I believe you're muted.
Okay. Hi, I'm Dale Lee, Wong Lee, and I resided at Ming Quong, Los Gatos from 1951 to 56. We're referred to as the baby generation since our group was the last to leave Ming Quong before they closed their doors. I was 5 years old when I became part of Ming Quong, Los Gatos. My father had passed away and my mom couldn't support me. So she was concerned about my welfare and was informed about the Ming Quong home for young Chinese girls. On a bright sunny day, my mother and my older sister and I left San Francisco and took a trip to Los Gatos. Suddenly, it was goodbye and my mom was gone without me. Yes, there were a lot of tears, but gradually tears turned into smiles with the help of my new sisters. I left Ming Quong when I was 10 years old with foster parents who took me into their San Francisco home. I stayed there until I was married at 21. There were a lot of activities at the Ming Quong campus. My favorite was Kick the Can, and it's a delightful game of hide and seek. There were a lot of hiding places. There were plenty of playmates to join in the game. It was there that I learned how to ride a bike and skate on roller skates. Another activity I enjoyed every year was the yearly camping trip to Big Basin. Unfortunately, that's when I found out that I was highly allergic to poison oak. I spent a few weeks in the infirmary each year. We think about our lives and our self-worth is always a question that we like to think about. I had no idea what I wanted to accomplish after graduating from Lowell High School. My foster parents paid to send me to a dental nursing school. I worked as an assistant for 2 years. Accomplishment got my crooked teeth straightened. I still wanted to attend college, so I took a semester at San Francisco City College. Accomplishment, meet my future husband. Now, fast forward 50 years, I have 4 wonderful children and 3 daughters and a son. Accomplishment, mother of 4, grandmother of 9. The 4 children have families of their own. Their college education took them into music, finance, computer, and marketing. I also returned to college in my late 50s to earn my AA degree. I have found time to donate my services to my church as a camp cook, music leader, piano player, and a seamstress. We make Halloween and Christmas bags for the children at the UC hospital. I retired from the local school district after 26 years. I climbed the work ladder as an ESL aide, high school registrar, coordinator of outdoor education, and lastly, the district office administrative assistant. All of this is important because it led me to a full life. I have my adoring family and my children and grandchildren, and the memories of my professional accomplishments. I'm proud of my life. I'm proud that I've earned my MGM degree, mother and grandmother status. Thank you. And Janet, it's now all yours.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello? Oh, hi.
Yes.
My name is Jana Chang. I was 12 years old when I arrived at the Los Gatos Ming Quong home in the summer of 1959. I attended Louise Van Meter Elementary and University Avenue Middle Schools. In 1961, I returned to my family home in the Bayview Hunters Point district. One afternoon, I was called to the main house, and as I approached, I saw a small sports car and the doors opened like wings, and a lovely red-haired lady stepped out and smiled. She said, "Hello, my name is Mrs. Johnson." We spent the afternoon in the library. We chatted, played games and puzzles. We had a lovely time. The next year, Mrs. Johnson came again. She asked me about school. I told her I hated school and my grades were straight unsatisfactories. She looked surprised and she said, "Did you know that you were very bright?" I was stunned. I thought I was stupid. Mrs. Johnson was the first person to ever say anything positive about me and school. She described that the games that we had been playing was really the Stanford Binet IQ test. She told me that my score, 147, was in the range of gifted, very gifted. As I was thinking about this new information, I still felt stupid. In 1961, I was abruptly sent back to my family and started middle school. Immediately, the bullying and name-calling started again. In class, one of the girls said, "I don't want any chinks at my table." As we exited the class, she stepped on my heels. I placed my books on the floor. I turned to her, I grabbed her dress, threw her against the lockers, pulled back her dress and the back buttons went flying, and then I punched her. I picked up my things and I said, "I'll meet you down at the principal's office." My future was doomed. Multiple suspension from fighting were the basis for sending me to the Ming Quong home. My fear was that I could be sent to juvenile hall next, or beaten up, or worse, at my next school. I needed a plan. My sister was already attending the prestigious Lowell High School, known for their excellent college preparatory program. I applied. I was rejected. Wasting no time, I contacted Ming Quong and requested to send my IQ test result to Lowell High School. In addition, I wrote a pleading note. "Dear Lowell, my daughter has emotional problems, but has potential. Please give her a chance." Signed, Mrs. Helen Chang. I was accepted. I graduated from Lowell and graduated from college. I earned a BS in nursing and then an MS in public health. In San Francisco, I spent my summers exploring the neighborhood on my bicycle. The summers in Los Gatos were glorious. We had a wide breadth of activities. We attended church camp in the mountains and camping at New Brighton Beach. The days were filled with crafts, baton twirling, swimming, and tennis lessons. In high school, I was recruited to the tennis team. Being part of a team connected me with others, increased my self-esteem, and helped me to control my impulsive emotions. In addition, tennis kept me in school. In adulthood, tennis continued to be a part of my life. I played and captained many teams in USTA until 2020. With 540 matches completed, I have hung up my USTA card. Tennis played a huge positive role throughout my life. It gave me confidence as it was the one thing that I felt I had competency in. The years of competition taught me cooperative teamwork and how to communicate effectively. Participating in tennis teams provided the lessons that sometimes life is sometimes tough, isn't always fair, and how to accept defeat. All the lessons from the court have served me well in work and in life. In closing, starting with my first lessons at age 12 in Los Gatos to today at age 74, I continue to play tennis. My greatest joy from tennis are all the many wonderful friends that I have met, traveled with, shared our wins and losses, and many have become lifelong friends. Thank you very much for listening. And now, back to Erwin.
I think it's back to me, Janet.
Elena. Thank you. Thank you.
Now that you've heard from us briefly about our experiences at Ming Quong Home, I'd like to share with you some slides that will capture the alumni and their children. David, thank you. This is a Ming Quong reunion with the former missionaries of Ming Quong. Next. Gathering at the Los Gatos Ming Quong Home. Next. At the opening of the Ming Quong display at the new Museum of Los Gatos.
There's Nona in the middle.
Next. Here is Mrs. Higgins, the director with the Ming Quong girls, and this is about a 1940 vintage picture. Next. Nona Mock Wyman, our big sister, leader, and author. Next. Dr. Ruth Wu, academic leader in nursing, and she opened the doors for retention of minority nursing students. Next. Estelle Jung Kelly blossomed as an entertainer and a community volunteer. Next. Sisters Lynette and Loretta, from childhood to accomplished adults. Next. Bernice Bing, a renowned artist now currently showing her work at the De Young Museum in San Francisco. Next. Amy and Louise, from yesterday to adulthood. Next. Ardeo Wong, panelist, talented ukulele player and piano player too. Next. Emmy Diaz, the first Asian American pharmaceutical rep in Washington, D.C. Next. Pat Jung, the registered nurse, and Dolly, and to us, she's known for her kindness and community service. Next. Sylvia Liu, the one that gathers us all together for our reunions and a good time. Next. That's me. And I'm just passionate about teaching and changing the educational system to serve all kids. Janet. Next. A mover and a shaker, while a healing voice of reason and compassion. Next. B. Wong, Mother of the Year for the City of Oakland, and one of the first founders for the Oakland Chinese Chamber of Commerce. Next. Helen May Wong Kee, the Commissioner of Aging for the City of Oakland, and was always known to repay Ming Quong staff for kindness shown to her. Next. These are her daughters, and whoops, back one, please. Can we go back one, David? There she is. These are her daughters on the left, and you all know Jerry. She is one of the most talented women I know, a community leader, a Ming Quong supporter, and a writer, and uses her leadership to get things done. Next. Brenda Wong, an accomplished actress, poet, and writer. Her mother was Betsy Wong. In summary, with little to nothing, the Ming Quong alumni have survived and have led successful lives. Next slide, please. This has been done because of Donna Dina Cameron and her leadership and her compassion that made all these services possible. Next. This is just to remind you, this is the story of Ming Quong Home, and not to be confused with the facility that serviced rescuing the victims of human trafficking. Next. We wanted to leave you with something very special. Lynette is one of our Ming Quong sisters, and this is her legacy, but it really teaches us about how we live. I'm going to read it to you, so pick out the parts you like, and you can always get this at another time. Well, that ends our portion of the story of the Ming Quong sisters. And on the on behalf of the Ming Quong sisters, we thank you for this opportunity to participate in this memorable webinar. Now, Chris, are you ready to take on and helping us with our questions and answers?
Yes, I am. And let's get everyone up on the screen. I want to and please unmute yourselves.
I think we're okay.
And we have one more. Okay. Now, there were a lot of questions, but I'd say we can use some more. So don't be shy. If you have questions, please enter them into the Q&A and we'll see if we can get to them. There is a question about the appearance of the houses. It was pointed out that one of the houses was a beautiful blue Victorian, but also is a picture of a white California mission style building. So who wants to tell us which of those was located, for example, in Oakland or in Los Gatos? Can anyone say which was the Victorian house and which was the California mission style building?
Actually, it wasn't the Victorian home. It was the Oakland home was just a Chinese home designed by Julia Morgan.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right. And the other one was the Los Gatos.
The Los Gatos home was the Spreckles Summer Estate.
It's craftsman style.
And
Crap.
Oh,
the Mills College one was the one that was designed by Julia Morgan,
Right.
an
Great.
offshoot of Bernard Maybeck.
mhm. Okay. Now, someone asked, was the King's daughter's home in El Cerrito in any way tied to Ming Quong?
No,
Not that I know of.
No.
Any relationship with the homes were separate, except that Chung Mei home was happened because of Captain Shepherd or Dr. Shepherd, but it was Donna Dina Cameron who felt that the boys needed a place to stay. And she was under tremendous pressure because you have to understand, not only did the San Francisco community, but the Presbyterian community in many ways didn't want her being known for rescuing victims of human trafficking. And yet we had both boys and girls that needed help. And so she pleaded with Captain Shepherd and said, you know, they need a father figure and we need a place for them.
Can you get me on though?
So that made a change. Nona, did you have something to say?
Question that you asked me to tell you why I wrote the book Bamboo Woman. It's because women are like bamboo. When the wind blows, it bends, it doesn't break. And that's what these women were. And so were the teachers at the Ming Quong home and Donna Dina Cameron. So today I am able to share the spiritual radiant light with strangers to uplift their lives. And also, it also means literally brilliant, bright, shiny, bright. And that's what I tell my customers, and they go out happy and content. Not only because they're bright and smart and all that, but because they are the radiant light of Ming Quong.
Thank you, Nona. Chris, do you have some more questions for us?
I do. There's a question about how you received your education. Some want to know, did you receive some of your education at the Ming Quong home, or did you primarily receive it in the local schools?
We attended local schools in the area, public schools, but our university education was what we could do for ourselves. And in my position, I was lucky because I was on tennis scholarships. I wanted to be a medical doctor, but realized that playing tennis and going to the university were really a pretty tough chore to do at the same time. So I decided I wasn't set up for medical school. I didn't have the money and I didn't have the stamina. So I changed and majored in business administration, organization, and marketing.
Great. Well, you answered a question from an anonymous attendee who was going to ask, did you become a doctor? So now we know the answer that you didn't do that. So,
but I am a doctor of education.
You've got your doctoral degree, but not in medicine.
Right.
That's great. So does any of you have the urge to find out more about your biological family if you didn't know much about it over the course of the years?
I did. I was very upset when I went to a reunion and didn't know about what was said about us as Ming Quong sisters, and I'll tell you about that later on. But I decided, well, since I know very little of anything that's the truth, the phone company found my birth certificate. And then from there, I went to this, the county office of a recorder's office in Marysville and found my mother's death certificate. And that led me into looking, well, what about the rest of the family? What do I know? So I started looking at the 1930 and the 1920 census and found her name on those census reports. It took months. And then from that, I was able to track that my grandfather was actually born in San Francisco in the 1800s. So I'm a third generation Chinese American.
Wonderful. Does anyone else want to answer that question?
Well, I always kept in contact with my mother, and unfortunately, she spoke Chinese and I lost my language. So it was hard to communicate. But I did have an older sister and brothers from another marriage. She was one of these picture brides that came over from China. Her first husband was like 40 or 50, and she was only about 19 or 20 and had her 4 children. So I was able to stay in touch with the family, and that's about all I know. I don't know much about my father since I was so young when he passed away. But, you know, my sisters and my brothers have told me these things about my family. And so it's really hard to go back any further than that because of my mother's situation. I understand she was a servant to a very rich family, and she was actually sold by her parents for medicine for her sick mother. So that's something, you know, that I try to pass on to my children so they understand the history of our family.
Okay.
Chris, can I
Um,
ask a question?
yeah, you can add something too.
So, anonymous attendee asks, who may we contact to determine if a family member lived at Ming Quong? And the answer to that is the Los Gatos Public Library has graciously volunteered to archive what we have from Ming Quong. So they have the ledgers. Now the ledgers aren't complete, but they are as complete as whatever that existed at the time. So if this person would like to look at the ledgers, it is online, okay, through the Los Gatos Public Library. And then, or they could go directly to Los Gatos and contact the library that they would like to see the ledger. But that's an example, that's a possibility of determining. The clue is most likely they would have been referred through Cameron House in San Francisco, through the social workers in San Francisco.
One other caveat to that is that when the ledgers were found, they were in this dusty old room, and they have some entries there from 1915. And so when we were trying to actually track where the Ming Quong girls were or how they got there, we found that there's a mix-up because the ledger on the side writing says Ming Quong home doesn't match any of the writing that are of the entries. And they had entries of the little kids at Tooker home. And the only reason we knew that is Janet was so gracious. She drove me to San Francisco Cameron House. We went through all their files and we looked up the names of the kids that were there from 1915 to 1925. They were at Tooker home and not Ming Quong home. There, I've said it.
Great. Okay. So there are a couple of questions about the Presbyterian Church. The first one is whether or not you were required to practice the Presbyterian religion while you were living at the home.
We weren't required, but it was fun to get off campus and socialize. And we would, after breakfast, we'd all jump in the car and we'd go to church, and we would be with people of our own age in our group. But then on the way back, many of us wanted to walk home. And so we walked home from Shannon up the hill to Ming Quong. Well, you can't do that now because there's just houses there. But I found Presbyterian to be a very open religion. I accepted it. I joined the church. I was baptized there. I felt very comfortable. I did not feel that that it was, foisted on us at all. And I felt very comfortable.
Well, you know, both Loretta and Lynette are Catholic, and Ming Quong did accept them. I was Catholic, but I just enjoyed the Ming Quong religion a lot more because I didn't have to go to confession anymore with the priest.
Yeah. Okay. Well, what was the role of the church? Did they fully fund the Ming Quong home? Did they provide any additional assistance, such as college scholarships for those who went on to college? I guess basically, what was the financial role of the Presbyterian Church?
It's twofold. One, when it came to facility building, there was a very strong group of Presbyterian women that were society women. They and Captain Robert Dollar donated huge amounts of money to get Ming Quong built. And I'm sure they gave gifts when they could. But Nona's book, and what I do remember a little bit was that there was, if the parents could afford it, there was a $50 fee per month for our board. There was also money given through social services for those girls that were placed there. And then when you talk about other things, you know, I was really fortunate. We had volunteers that came into Ming Quong home. You know, I was very, I had buck teeth and I hated it. And there's a famous and well-known orthodontist in Oakland that was Chinese. And he went to Miss Musgrave, our director, and said, who would benefit in your group from braces? And he interviewed me, and I remember saying, well, I do want to go to college. I intend to go to college, and I intend to do well. And he says, well, you can't do well with buck teeth and a crooked smile. So we're going to fix that for you. But you must promise me that you will return good deeds to the community afterwards. And that's what stuck with me. Some of the tennis lessons, people came in and tried to teach me how to sing and dance. And Dale benefited, but I sure didn't. I mean, you do not want me singing. I would scare everybody out of the room.
One of the groups that helped us was the town of Los Gatos. Oh, I'm sorry. Do you want me to continue? Hello?
Yes, continue. I don't know what that sound was.
So, supporting the girls and supporting the home was in multiple ways. And one of the layers was the city of Los Gatos. They were very welcoming. In fact, the only Asian kids in Los Gatos were from the Ming Quong. So here, if any poor little kids with used clothes and they knew who we were, okay? But at the same time, everybody was welcoming. Nobody felt that they had racist name calling or anything. So one of the things they did was they brought us gifts. They took us out to lunch. They started several stores that all benefit the Ming Quong and uplift today. So one of them is called Happy Dragon. It's used clothes. The other is it's a very upscale gift shop called Butter Paddle, and it's on the main street of Los Gatos, and all the proceeds go and benefit the program. And I'm a volunteer at the Butter Paddle today. So I've gone full circle. I've gone from resident at Ming Quong to now a volunteer helping through the Butter Paddle that the uplift benefits Ming Quong is a part of now. So we were very fortunate that the town accepted us and helped us thrive.
It was
Okay.
Can they hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. This is known.
Yes, we hear you fine.
When I received letters of thank you from my classmates, some of the girls or some of the children in Los Gatos thought that we were rich people from China that had come over here to get away from the war. And they were surprised that we were not the little rich girls, but little orphans. I mean, most of them were orphans.
Right. Okay, well, one of the questions that comes up about the Chinese language, there was a picture of a Chinese lesson. I think that's was the reason for this question. So, were there women, girls who came into the home that already knew how to speak Chinese? And for those who didn't, did the Chinese lessons do them any good?
Well, I
Probably.
spoke Chinese when I, first arrived, but then I realized I had lost it within a year since I didn't use it. So unfortunately, Mrs. Lee was no longer at the home when I came, and so I had no way of retaining the Chinese language.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of pieces to that. What happened was they moved Ming Quong near the Oakland Chinatown because Donadine and Cameron wanted us to know the Chinese community and the Chinese culture. We were losing it in Los Gatos, and so that was an opportunity to try to groom us. They also sent, in my generation, sent us to Chinese school, sponsored in Chinatown. But we were such little rowdy kids. I threw the basketball at the principal's head and then got expelled immediately. Mrs. Lee was such a gentle soul, and she was teaching us, proper Cantonese. Some of the girls at the homes didn't speak Cantonese, but came from another dialect, so there were some problems there. The problem with my Chinese from San Francisco was all in the vernacular, and I knew every bad word, but I couldn't speak a full word that was a good sentence. So, although we appreciated the efforts they made, it was hard for it to sink in for us. We were too busy by the time high school, we were taking French and Spanish and Latin and German. So it's sad because now I appreciate it. And, I have a granddaughter, she's learning Japanese now. And so it shows you come full circle around language.
In my generation, Mrs. Lin taught us, her name was Mrs. Lee. She remarried Mary Jane's father and became Mrs. Lin. And she also taught us not how to ask a question in Chinese, but mainly Bible verses and arise ye who refuse to be bond slaves. Okay, songs like that. So we were taught the proper way. We knew how to sing Silent Night in Chinese and Joy to the World, everything like that. So it was mainly religious songs that we learned at the home.
I remember you guys did the doxology in Chinese. I was blown away at that Oakland reunion. That was your interview, and we're sitting around the table, and you said the doxology in Chinese. I said, wow.
Yeah. Well, Elena, you mentioned misbehaving. There is a question. How were you punished if you didn't follow the rules? So was there a regimen for punishments at Ming Quong?
It depends on the teacher. Miss Hayes, who was a little different, would pull down a girl's pants and spank her with a ruler. No, I don't know about any other teachers doing anything like that, but it was always Miss Hayes.
And yet I was one of Miss Hayes's favorites because I would say, I did it.
Did she ever pull down your pants?
No, she would say,
oh my God.
She would say, Elena, I know you're sorry. And you know what you did. Go to the kitchen and do your KP duty. And I loved it because I loved Miss Reber. I mean, she's the one that told me I was a princess because I couldn't get any shoes out of that clothes closet because my feet were too narrow. So she said, well, we're going to take you down to the department store in Los Gatos and buy your shoes. And I said, I don't want those new shoes. I want shoes like what the girls wear. And she said, Elena, people with narrow feet don't do a lot of heavy work. because they don't have the support for it. And you're a princess, and you better find an occupation that you can marry a very rich prince. And I still remember her telling
And she lived happily ever after.
Chris, on my first day that I arrived at the home, they asked me to go out and make friends. Well, I was an angry child. I got into a fight. I came back into the building, and Miss Martin was walking towards me with the light behind her, and something was shaking her back. And when I realized that she had a hairbrush in her hand, and I said to her, "You are not going to touch me. You are not going to hit me. If you touch me, I will kick and slap you back twice as hard, and you will be on the ground. What I will do is I will go into the room. I will not have dinner. I will not come out until breakfast." And when we would come to these reunions, everybody would say, "Janet, you're the only one that Mrs. Martin never spanked." But you know, it's so insulting. It's horrible to spank someone physically. And I just knew that from the beginning. My mother never spanked me, even though I gave her hell, but I was surely not going to let this ugly lady hit me. So I just said, "Not me," and I walked away.
And that,
you can read all about Janet in my Bamboo Woman book. She was a bamboo woman for sure.
Oh, I love you, Donna.
Yeah. By the way, we do have questions about how to acquire the books and things, other questions, which I think are better answered in writing. So we will go through the chat and the Q&A, and I will send something out afterwards to all of the attendees that gives answers to these simple questions that can be better answered in writing. Now, as far as the other content questions are concerned, someone wants to know about the connection between Ming Quong and Zhongmei, if any. I think this is an important question because, as many of you know, we also had a webinar about the Zhongmei Orphanage for Chinese Boys about a month ago.
The Zhongmei home that's where my cousins lived, my brother lived, and the Los Gatos home is where my other cousins lived, and myself and my sister. And also going back to being disciplined, do you two girls remember the cage in the laundry room? That was in my generation.
they probably got rid of it because of you, Nona.
Yeah, it was a very low cage, and this girl had stolen barrettes, and they covered her head completely with barrettes that they could find anywhere at the home. And so everybody came down and looked at poor Ida in the cage, and she would just probably die now if she knew I was talking about her. But that's the way it went. So it was the cage. We were also in a cage, and Paula fell asleep in the cage. The little girl.
That place would have been shut down if anybody knew that.
Today, right? But
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But in terms of your question, Chris, I alluded to the fact that Donna Dina Cameron was a very persuasive person, and she did get Dr. Shepard to create Chongmei Home. There were girls that were sent to Ming Quong and their brothers sent to Chongmei. There was a good relationship because every time there was a special function, the Ming Quong girls would do something to perform, or if Ming Quong was doing something, the Chongmei boys came with their band and they played at it. What's interesting is when you look at that log, although it's hard to decipher some of the handwriting, when I first did my analysis, I found 39 sets of siblings, from 2 to 4 siblings at Ming Quong. And I'm now getting information from some of the girls that have lived there. They said, and my brother was sent to Chongmei. So there is a relationship because of the time period that these homes were when they were established.
Mhm.
Also,
Okay.
Lynette married my cousin Mousy. Did you know that?
Mhm.
Any other questions, Chris?
Oh, definitely.
Oh,
Someone is asking if any of you feel any anger towards your family or whoever placed you at Ming Quong. And did
No,
the staff at Ming Quong help you get through that if you did have that kind of anger?
no, I don't
No.
really think so, because they were all single parents. I mean, single individuals, except for that Mrs. Lee that was married twice. And I remember the time when she started putting on lipstick, and they go, "Oh, Mrs. Lee's got lipstick on." Go, "Oh gosh, she likes Mary Jane's father." So, talks like that, but usually not.
Mhm. Okay, go ahead, Janet.
My father was a merchant marine, and that's why all of us, when he worked on the ships, he came back every 2 years. So every 2 years he came back and he found the baby, and then he went again. So one Sunday night, he's looking at the table and he's going 1, 2, 3, 4. Wait a minute, 1, 2, 3, 4. Janet's missing. Where is Janet? Okay, so my mother had to tell my father that I was at the Ming Quong home, and he was quite upset. Okay, and I was not upset because I was such an angry, flawed child. I drove my mother crazy. My mother was a single mother living outside of Chinatown, no car, poor, and she had 5 kids, and I was the one kid that was making her crazy. You never, as a Chinese family, you never want to be called to school. It's such an embarrassment to be called to school. And my mother was so embarrassed that I embarrassed and I was a difficult child. I was a difficult child. So I had, and going to the Ming Quong home taught me civility. If someone bumped me, they said, "Excuse me." Back in San Francisco, if someone bumped me, they say, "I'm gonna kick your ass." Okay, but in San Francisco and compared to Los Gatos, I mean, it was a totally different environment. So I was not angry with my parents at all. So when I showed up at home again, they said, "Oh, look, Miss Janet." But I was never mad at my mother or my family. They did the best they could do.
Chris, I think we all have come to that conclusion. Whoever we stayed with, even if they weren't the right kind of people or they couldn't help us because they were poor themselves, Ming Quong gave you the stability and the security of a place. They weren't counselors, mental health crisis counselors like we have today. And the girl, I learned very early not to embarrass any girl. If she was having a problem, I would say to Miss Musgrave, "I think you should talk to so-and-so. I think she's feeling bad." But I wouldn't get into what it was because I learned it was not my place to do that, and that I'm not that nosy to hurt somebody's feelings. And so I think the Ming Quong staff were very kind. And one of the things after I left Ming Quong, I was angry for a little while because I said, "Why did it have to close?" But when I saw Miss Musgrave's face, there were tears in her eyes when she said, "I can get you back to your relatives in San Francisco or place you with a nanny." And I don't know what it was in me, but I didn't want to be anybody's servant because, one, I never learned how to clean very well. And if they said sweep the hallway and then mop it, I would say, "Well, why do you want to sweep if you're going to mop it? Just shove the stuff down the stairs, and then the next person will have to take care of it." But, and when they punished us, we deserved it.
Okay, I think I'll ask one final question before we go to each of your closing comments. And and that's a question about, life after Ming Quong. And I think it's kind of a two-part question. One is with stories like Elena just told. Maybe the others of you want to say something about how did you adjust to life outside of Ming Quong once you got out? The other is when Ming Quong itself closed and there was no longer a Ming Quong, then was there any other institution or social services or whatever that took care of Chinese girls who were in need?
Well, you
in
know
my
that.
case, oh, go ahead,
Well,
Nona.
you know that Ming Quong means radiant light, and academically it means bright, smart, shiny, and all that good stuff. But so I am grateful that the word orphanage was coined in the my first write-up of Bamboo Woman, because now I am able to relate to others about what radiant light means. So they always go out feeling good. I guess that's
Okay.
the only thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Dale, did you want to say something?
Yeah, it's, I was so young when I was at Ming Quong. I really didn't have a care in the world. I had people to look after me, and it's funny she mentioned Miss Martin, because Miss Martin was my favorite housekeeper. Of course, I was very quiet and shy, so that was different. But in my case, I was lucky. My foster parents, John and Fern Schmidt, would come down every weekend and take two of us back to San Francisco, and we enjoy going to the zoo or walking or, doing something fun in San Francisco. So then when they found out that Ming Quong was closing, the question was, where can Dale go? She has nobody she can go to. And they asked if they would like to keep me, and sure enough, they kept me. So
Okay.
that's how I came there. And the family actually grew. She couldn't have any children. So in the meantime, I was the first one. And then they adopted a Samoan girl. And then another Chinese girl from Ming Quong, Oakland, came to live with us. And then 3 Korean girls from Korea. And so we made an international family. And so, but I grew up and never thought of anything that was displeasure or anything. I just thought, oh, this is great. I have someone look after me. And then when I met someone at 21, I got married and proceeded with my life. So
Great.
It's good. Yes.
Okay. Well, I think Nona, if you want to speak, you need to unmute yourself. I think now we will go into the closing statements, beginning with Nona, moving to Elena and Dale and Janet. So I'm going to step off the screen and let you go.
Thank you.
Closing statement. I am just grateful that Ming Quong was there for me. For without Ming Quong, which means the radiant light, I don't know where I'd be today. But I do have my store, Ming Quong, so I am able to relate to others my good experiences at the home, and I am grateful for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Nona. I guess I'm next, and I guess I'm going to be the rebel in this show, because I want to talk about something that might be uncomfortable for some people. But Ming Quong alumni have been subject to misinformation and character assassination for a long time. We've been labeled prostitutes or orphans of prostitutes by writers, reporters, college students, curators, and historians in articles found in numerous Google listings as recent as 2017. This destructive misinformation encourages dehumanization. Nona's book will show many of the challenges that the girls made, and they did well by it. Now, most of us are 70 to 94 years old, and we want this information corrected and an accurate history of Ming Quong, not hearsay and not erroneous conclusions. We want the right, the wrong, and have our dignity returned to us and our families, because we are proud bamboo women. Thank you. Dale?
Okay, thank you, Helena. So I'd like to take a moment to thank the Chinese Historical and Cultural Project for allowing me to participate in this webinar. Helena and Janet have opened my awareness of Ming Quong's history. Because of their hard work, I have expanded my knowledge of how Ming Quong affected the lives of so many girls who walk through these doors. Thank you for allowing me to join you in this journey. Janet, yours.
The Ming Quong home was a safe port in a terrible storm for many of us, including myself. In 1959, I stepped through the gate deeply flawed, and by the time I left, I had a direction forward. Nona wrote me a haiku. The lotus, feisty Chinese girl in a black neighborhood, muscles like Popeye. Our stories are part of the Los Gatos, the Chinese community, the larger community, and our family's histories. In closing, I'd like to thank CHCP and Irwin for the support of all the Ming Quong sisters. Also, I'd like to acknowledge Chris Yoakum and David Wu for their patient direction and expertise. Thank you very much for your time and interest. And now I will pass the webinar back to Irwin, our gracious host. Thank you.
Thank you, Janet and Elena and Dale. That was fantastic. I really enjoy this webinar that you participated, and thank you for being here and sharing all your histories and information about Ming Quong. And so with this ends our webinar. Again, I'd like to thank all of you for being here and watching the webinar. And again, thank you, Chris and David. That was fantastic. Thank you very much for your monitoring this webinar. So with this, I like to say, I wish all of you to stay healthy and safe. So with this, good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.